Yo, 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 welcome back to the PPP podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about feminism, its effects on society, and basically how our society functions.
So before we start, a quick trigger warning. First of all, we're going to be mentioning stuff like rape and domestic abuse and stuff that could be very triggering for some people. So viewer discretion is advised. Secondly, all three of us are pretty liberal people. All of us support the feminist movement and its message. And so all we talk about here, just keep in mind that we are all in support of the feminist movement and that we are not trying to invalidate it whatsoever. And finally, we are going to be mentioning the TERF movement and J.K. Rowling. So just trigger warning up ahead. For our first episode of politics, I think it's good to focus on like one of the biggest movements in the 21st century, and that is like feminism and how like women are standing up and saying that they're not equal to men, but they want to be, right? So the question is like, what exactly is feminism?
I think that feminism, it's a lot of different things. Personally, I consider myself a feminist. I believe in standing up for the rights of women, and I believe in equality for women all across the world. I think that a lot of people have this really bad misconception, and this is, you could say, like one of the dark sides of feminism. A lot of people believe that feminism isn't about equal rights. It's about women wanting more power than men, to be higher than men. But in reality, feminism is just women and men sharing equal ground, and feminism is women having the same rights to education, to healthcare, to job opportunities and pay and all of that stuff as the same as men. And I think that where people are misguided is that they think that like feminists, like the term feminist means something like, okay, take this conversation, right? I'm like losing my train of thought here, but I had this conversation with my friend a while ago. So we were talking about, politics and what's going on in our politics. I mentioned that I really believe in the feminist movement. Like I go to protests and I fight for what's right. And she said, oh, I don't believe in feminism. And I was like, well, what do you mean you don't believe in feminism? And she was like, I think feminists are stupid and dumb. And I was like, what do you mean feminists are stupid and dumb? And she proceeded to tell me how feminists are taking over the media with their lies about how women should be treated like awfully as opposed to women, and women should be the rulers of the nation and that men should be, like treated like slaves or whatever. And I was like, that's not what we want. That's not what the movement is about. The movement is about ensuring that women get the same rights as men. Not that we get more rights than them, but we get the same rights. And at least that's my definition. That's what I believe the movement is. I know there are some groups out there that have given feminism a bad name. So
a lot of people support feminism because it's fighting back against like misogyny and widely held beliefs that women are inferior or that men are better than women. And that ties into a lot of what we see in society. And I kind of agree with you, Voica, how like feminism isn't about trying to be better than men. If it was, then that wouldn't really be the right cause to support, right? Instead, feminism is about trying to give equal opportunities for women so that they're equal to men. And going back to last time's episode about not like other girls, I think that phenomenon has a lot to do with misogyny and feminism, because a lot of people, they find themselves saying like, I'm not like other girls, and they put down other women because that's just what they do in order to be viewed as special.
And I think that what has happened, this is what at least what I've seen from modern culture and like on Instagram, like Twitter and like all these social medias, is that like people will call themselves feminists and then put other women down. And that's like another dark side of the feminist movement, is that feminism isn't just about having the same rights as men. It's also about supporting and respecting and uplifting other women. And it's about not just ensuring that women get the same rights as men, but that women are heard and that women are respected just as much as men. And that's more than just making sure they get the same, education and the same pay. It's more about that their voice is heard in social media and that they're as powerful and as respected as men that might be like working as hard. And when I see these like teen girls, like 16-year-olds on social media being like, I'm super feminist, holds up a peace sign, like sticks out her tongue, like, I'm super feminist. And then 2 days later, she's like hopping on the train of like bashing other women and like going with the mob mentality of cancel culture. You can't call yourself a feminist and then bash other women. Like, that's not the point.
Okay, so we established that like feminism is about sexism kind of a thing, but I feel like these days it's more branched out towards like other sectors too. Like there's LGBT and then there's like Black Lives Matter movement. So like would that be considered feminism? If you are an ally to the LGBTQ community, are the chances like higher that you'd be a feminist too?
Yeah, because if you're supporting the LGBTQ plus community, then that means that you obviously, if you're an ally and you support other people who are different than you, but still deserve the same rights and still deserve to be treated equally, you're probably really likely to be a feminist too, even if you're not a woman. I think being a feminist isn't just about the fact that you're a woman and that you don't have equal opportunity. It's kind of more about treating other people equally. Despite them looking different than you, despite them acting differently, they still deserve to be treated like human beings and have equal opportunities no matter what.
Exactly. And I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore feminist, but I do support a lot of like the message of feminism, right? In the sense that like everyone's equal and stuff. I definitely am more liberal than I am like conservative. So what about these extreme feminists? Like I've seen them on the internet and stuff, and that's kind of what's stopping me from becoming a like hardcore feminist, just because I don't really want to be associated with those people who are like what people call third wave feminists, where they're like all about women being number one and men being like what Voica said, slaves and stuff. And they're actually real. Like I've seen them on the internet and stuff, especially in posts that are like anti-men in a sense.
Right. Toxic femininity, that's real. Like, that's a real thing. A lot of people, when they hear feminism and, like, what we're trying to fix, they think, oh, like, toxic masculinity, that's, like, the only thing. Like, there's no such thing as toxic femininity. Like, women can do no bad, women can do no evil. While it's true that women are fighting for things that men have not allowed us to do for centuries, it's also true that there is such a thing as toxic femininity. There is such a thing as wanting to be higher than the men and wanting to have more power over the men, which I think is inherently wrong because that's not the point. You know, the point is that we're all equal. And same goes for Black Lives Matter. Same goes for the LGBTQ plus movement. All of that. It's all fighting for the same basic concept that we are all treated equal. And for centuries, for millennials, since the beginning of time, men have always been, you know, the top, the ones that have the most power, the most opportunities, the most respect in the industry. There was a study done, I can't even remember where it was published, but I'm sourcing this off the top of my head. But there was a study done that if you applied to a college, right, like regardless of your race or ethnicity, but you had a black sounding name, it was 27% more likely that they wouldn't accept you, even if you had the same credentials as someone who had a white sounding name. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's just a name. It's just what someone calls you, and you're gonna judge their whole character based off of their name. It's insane. All of the movements want the same thing, to be equal. We want to be treated equal. We want to be treated with the respect that the white, you know, male has been getting for centuries. When these hardcore third world feminists go so far as to say, like, oh, we want more than just be created equal. We want to be better. We want to be the best. We want men to have none of the opportunity anymore. We want them to be stripped of their opportunity, and we want them to feel how we have felt for centuries. While I understand the message, I'm not going to come out here and say that I don't get it. I do. We have been mistreated. Like, why shouldn't the men feel what we feel? You know, at the same time, it's going against the movement. It's going against the message. We want everyone to be treated equal, and that includes the white male groups.
Okay, so like going back to what you were talking about, how if you had a black sounding name that you were 27% less likely to be admitted to a college, even though like your credentials were the same as someone with a white sounding name, that ties a lot into society in America, because a lot of minorities in the US, their names are symbolizing their culture. They have very important meanings to them that hold a lot of like religious beliefs or like important hardships and stuff like that, right? And I think it's not fair, that people should be like put down or discriminated against. Those names are really important to a lot of minorities. So when you say something like that, it kind of makes me feel like the world is like, I guess, falling apart. It feels kind of, I guess, annoying that this is still going on and that we still have to talk about topics like this, like feminism and racism and homophobia and all of these different like discriminations against minorities and just people in general. And like you said, like a lot of these movements are fighting for equal treatment. It's not fair that we have to fight for these things. These things should have ended a long time ago, but they haven't, because the society that we live in kind of perpetuates these types of ideals that some groups are inferior to other groups, or that like women are inferior to men. Such ideals that keep living in our modern day society, they're the reason why we're still talking about this. We should have stopped talking about this a long time ago. We should have, as a society, recognized women should be equal to men. Minorities are equal to like white people in the US. We should have gotten over that a long time ago.
Right. And I think the fact that we haven't kind of reflects on like America, because America was founded in the 1700s, 1776, right? And from then to now, I don't think the core values of America has changed. We're still dealing with, I think, the same issues, the same fundamental issues as what people were dealing with back then. Like, yes, of course, women have gotten their suffrage, women have gotten more equal rights and more equal pay and stuff, better education, and same thing with other POC, like people of color. They have gotten a lot better treatment this century than they have in the 18th century. And of course, I definitely would not want to live in 1776 or whatever. But still, like the core idea that like a white man is the standard and that everyone else is like a derivative of that, and that everyone else is sort of treated differently and maybe worse, you know, stuff like that. That's been there for a really long time, and only now are we starting to like actually question it. And don't even get me started on like homophobia and stuff, especially since like being gay or being not straight has been human for a really, really long time. And not even human, like it's been something that every species has gone through, right? But still, like even now we're dealing with so much like homophobia and stuff, and we just haven't progressed. So I've been looking at all those like anti-feminist posts on the internet and stuff, and like one of them is arguing that like feminism isn't necessary because like already we have women who are unique and like who are pure and beautiful, and they don't need like feminism to make them seem like they are similar to men, right? So for example, there's this one comment that says that like there's something pure and unique about femininity and the beauty of a woman, and there's nothing empowering or nor beautiful about this obsession to become like a man at all costs, right? So yeah, what do you think?
That is the dumbest argument I have ever heard in my life. Okay, the feminist movement and what feminists want isn't for us to be men. We don't want to be men. We're proud to be women. We are proud to be in our bodies and to be the woman that we are. We don't want to be men. We don't want to be men. We want the same opportunities as men. And what this comment is basically saying is that, oh, you know, women's like the societal pressure that we have put on women for thousands of years is actually quite beautiful, and we shouldn't have to change our societal views of women just because a couple of women are saying that they want to be treated equally. Bitch, that is not what the movement is. Society has told us for years that we should be putting on these masks and should be, you know, shaving our arms, our legs every day, and wearing high heels and wearing the pleated skirts and the petticoats and parading around like trophy wives for the good old men of the world that can make a living, you know? And we've been paraded around like this for years. And finally, with this movement, we have an opportunity to say that we are much more than that. We are capable, and we are strong, and we are not men. And we are uniquely not men because we bring to the table the strength and the empowerment that men can only dream of having. That's what the feminist movement is. It isn't us saying, oh, we want to be men.
Exactly. Okay, disclaimer. 100% of the reason why rape happens is because someone is a rapist and they want to rape someone. Like, you can't victim blame and say, oh, it's because the woman was wearing something weird or the woman was drunk or whatever. It's whoever was raping, it's the rapist's fault, okay? 100%. Don't even argue. It's just a fact. Okay. One of the common arguments against, like, feminism is just that, like, why can't men sexualize women? Right? Then they're like saying women already like sexualize themselves so much. Like you see pictures and videos about like women being provocative and like twerking or whatever. And you also see like women's clothing, which is very like low cut and like very revealing. So, yeah, what do you think about that?
You're allowed to do what you want with your body. I'm not the person who decides what you wear, what you get to show of your body. I'm not the person who decides you can or can't love your body for the way it is. So like those kinds of posts and comments are so like, back to what you said, Yvette, victim blaming, because women are allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies, and they shouldn't have to be judged for making decisions to wear like a cute skirt or a cute dress or something, right? I feel like that wouldn't be fair to say that, oh, she deserved it because she wore something like that. Like, that doesn't make sense. And when does someone saying no ever mean that they want something? In what world does no have a positive connotation?
Exactly. That's like the main point against this stupid argument, right? Like just because a woman or someone is sexualizing themselves doesn't give the right for other people to do it to them. Like if you want to wear low-cut clothing, that's your right. You can do whatever you want. But it doesn't give other people an excuse to start like sexualizing you because you are your own person. That is your body. That's not someone else's body.
On the movement of anti-feminism, I really wanted to talk about this convention. I've been looking it up for a while now. It's called the 22 Convention with the subline, Make a Woman Great Again. And it's awful. It's awful. There's one called the 21 Convention, which is like a fatherhood, patriarchal convention. And then there's the 22 Convention, which is those said fathers mansplaining. And they've made mansplaining their brand. I just want to read you a little segment from their website just to give you a quick little summary of what they're about. So this says right here, femininity is greater than feminism, hiding under a mask of fake progress. Feminism today has become a radical assault on all forms of positive, traditional femininity. You know, the one hard-coded into your DNA. Through an onslaught of anti-feminine propaganda spanning generations, women today have been pushed to act like men and deny their own feminine nature. This has left millions of women feeling unhappy, confused, frustrated, and hopeless. At the 22 Convention, you will learn the truth that unhealthy militant feminists have been hiding from you your entire life in their war on men, boys, fathers, and women who simply enjoy being feminine. Now, when I read this, at first, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a big, hoax thingy to, get men to see how ridiculous their arguments sound. And then I realized that it's an actual convention, and people go to this, and it's for real.
Sounds like a cult to me.
It literally is. This is the extent that anti-feminism will go. Literally making an entire convention dedicated to teaching women how to be great again.
So, growing up as a female, it never occurred to me that, I didn't express, my feminine identity enough. That I wasn't feminine enough to fit into the ideals of being a woman. Hearing this makes me kind of angry because it's like men trying to teach women how to be feminine. Whereas I think it should be women trying to empower other women and making them realize that it's okay to be a woman, that you can express your feminine identity however you like. And it feels so wrong to hear stuff about this convention because it's like, who are you to decide how I should express my identity as a female? Who are you to decide whether the feminist movement has made progress or they're toxic or whatever? Why do such ideals even exist?
I got something to say. I think that if you walk into this world and you are fat shamed and slut shamed and just shamed for being a woman, and you walk out of the world still loving your body, you are the best possible version of yourself. You are literally, if you can walk into this world and out of it still loving yourself, that is beautiful. And I think that people tell other people all the time how to think and what to wear and how to feel all the time. And they do it a lot to women because women are supposed to be this like pretty perfect image. And to be able to stop caring about that and just love yourself for who you want to be and what you want to achieve, that is goals right there. Love yourself, people, love yourself. I love you.
Okay, so like going back to what you were saying about how people should love themselves for who they are, I feel like that's such an important thing that needs to be brought up in modern society because, like, I think feminism is just trying to bring up the point that people should love themselves for who they are, regardless of if they're a woman or not. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you need to have these, like, misconceptions that, like, you're a woman and you, like, deserve to be, like, hurt or thought of as an object, because that's not fair, right? And going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the episode, people deserve to be treated like people and not anything else, not like objects or animals or anything like that, because we all deserve to be treated like basic human beings. And I totally agree with what you're saying, like how in society so many people are discriminated against or hurt or over-sexualized just because they're women. I feel like if you can come out of that, if you can still love yourself for who you are and not take those comments seriously or literally, then I think you've just beaten the system.
It's so weird to say that. If I was like a third party, like omniscient being, it's so weird to hear people say that. Like, oh, if you go against society, which is telling you that you are a bad person, and you go out of it and you think you're a good person, then you win. That's so weird, because shouldn't society be helping people realize that they are good people? The fact that like our society is sort of structured this way that like, oh, it's normal for you to feel bad about yourself because of what other people tell you. I don't know, that's just really weird to me.
Yeah, like what Megan said, if you can come out of it and still love yourself in your body, then you've beaten the system. Why does the system have to be a place where people hate on your body? Like, why can't you expect to be uplifted and empowered? And like, why does the system do that to you? Is it like a way of punishment, or like what? Like, I've always wondered, like I've looked at our culture and I've looked at our toxic society, and I've just always been like, why can't we just empower each other? What's wrong with just like being like, you are beautiful, we stand a queen? Like, what is wrong with just being supportive and empowering?
Just segueing off that, I think it's really hard to sort of disagree with the feminist movement. Like, not like that I do or any of us do, but in a sense, like, if you argue against the feminist movement, you're arguing against equal rights. And so, like, it's good because the feminist movement is about supporting equal rights, but it's also, like, the reasoning behind that is kind of flawed too, because there's a difference between the message and the actual movement, right? We're going to explore this a lot later. Like, I don't think we should equate the entire feminist movement, which is made up by humans who make mistakes, with the idea of equal rights, which in itself is like something that's super important. If you disagree with it, then that's on you.
When you think about that statement, like, it's hard to disagree with the feminist movement, you're already like, why would you want to disagree with the feminist movement? And while I agree that you shouldn't disagree with the feminist movement, it's also become like the staple for like all of equality. Not personally, but I've talked to a couple of people that when I've said like equality, they immediately associate that with the feminist movement. And then like, it's so easy to point out everything wrong with the feminist movement and all of the flaws. And that one woman like 20 years ago, she said something super bad, like feminist movement is canceled, like hashtag RIP. And that also relates a lot to the cancel culture phenomenon. And I know I said this a lot. It's something that I'm very passionate about, because I've seen it happen. I mean, we've all seen it happen if you go on YouTube. Like, any makeup guru has at least, like, one, like, cancel culture video, right? I agree, like, when you make a movement, when you start a movement, and when it reaches the massive amount of support that the feminist movement has, you're bracing yourself for the hate that's going to come with it, and the cancel culture that's going to come with it, and the exposing, and the, oh, this one time this woman said something to me, and that's why I don't support the feminist movement. And it's like, you have to see the bigger picture, you know? That's what I always tell myself when I, like, see, like, these cancel culture and, like, this mob mentality going on. I'm like, you have to look at the bigger picture, and you have to see what it's all about first before you, like, hate on someone for, like, this one thing they said. Well, I can't just sit here and be a hypocrite and be like, I never support cancel culture. Like, I've never, like, tried to cancel someone. Like, yes, I have. But at the same time, like, when you're looking at these big movements that are for equality and that are for the greater good, you have to look at the bigger picture, and you can't just, like, attack for the small things. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And we're going to have a whole episode about cancel culture because it's become very prominent in society today. But yeah, segueing off that, what about, like, toxic masculinity, which is, like, a big cornerstone of the feminist idea?
Well, similarly to toxic femininity, like Voica was saying, society kind of forces these ideals of what a perfect man should be, of what a perfect woman should be. It feeds into much of our daily lives. Let's say you're a guy and you're like on the basketball team and you like something that's considered like girly. Then all of the guys will start calling you gay or something. Like, I've seen it happen a lot in middle school and high school. If you are different from the societal norm, then you're just labeled as something that's gay or bad. Like, being gay doesn't equate to being bad. Obviously not. Somewhere, somehow, society planted the idea that if you're different from the norm, then you're somehow terrible, that you're somehow the worst person that could ever exist. I don't really like how the word gay is seen as like an insult, where if like a prepubescent little boy says, "Oh, you're gay, you like My Little Pony." It's like, no, that isn't how it works. Being gay is not something that should be looked down on. And I mean, I'm going completely off topic here, but toxic masculinity. Basically, it's not fair to stereotype a group of people and saying, if you are different from this group of people, then you're automatically the worst person I have ever met. You are automatically some terrible person who has committed some heinous crime. It's like not fair. Like, we're talking about the whole feminist movement here. A lot of people say that men are trash. And I don't really agree with that statement. I love the feminist movement because it empowers women, but I don't like how a lot of people will instantly degrade men just to further their cause. I feel like they're just perpetuating toxic masculinity.
And I think that once you start to detangle the web of stereotypes around women, at least for me personally, I kind of like subconsciously start to put men in the same groups. I have a great group of friends. Shout out to Bronzemer, Alex, and Chris. I have this great group of friends, right? And they themselves have been like, we are big nerds, we are the geeks, right? And like, for some reason in my mind, that subconsciously like sorted them into a group. And it took me a while to figure out like why I do that. I think it's because like I'm just so used to growing up with like movies and like books and stuff like that said, oh, if this guy is a nerd, then he's gotta be like this. And I found out that people are so much different than that. And they're so much more complex, and they're their own individual beings. And it's so easy to sort men and women and whatever into stereotypes. And it's so easy to just be like, oh yeah, oh my god, if she dresses like this, she automatically is a hoe. Like, if she dresses like this, she automatically like is a tomboy that plays sports. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we can even go a step further and say that like feminism isn't just about women's issues, it's also about men's issues as well. Because I think a lot of arguments against feminism are saying, oh, you're only focused on like women's sexual abuse or women's sexual assault and not about like men's domestic violence or men's assault. And I think the true purpose of feminism is equality, right? So I think one part of feminism is in fact addressing these issues that are held by men. Going back to what Megan said, like about, oh, if you're not this, then you're gay or something, right? That whole idea of like, if you don't fit in with the stereotype, then you're this. I think it's a form of manipulation in a sense. You're sort of forcing these people to stick in, otherwise they'd be branded as an outcast. And so I think that explains why there's so many cases of like men abusing other people, like whether that be other men or whether that be women or LGBTQ plus people or stuff like that. That's part of the reason, because the stereotype is that men are strong, and then the way to prove that you're strong is to, you know, fight or to, you know, show your muscles or your physical strength and stuff like that. I think feminism is fighting back against toxic masculinity and the patriarchy, but it is not fighting against men's rights or men's issues. I think it's time we make that as clear as possible.
Can we just talk about the portrayal of men and women in like movies and TV shows?
This is something that I have grown very angry at. You know that there's this whole cliche about the girl that comes into a man's life and she changes it forever and then she mysteriously leaves. Like, that cliche, how many times have I wanted to be that girl that just, like, came into a man's life and, like, changed it forever? And
that just shows that, like, women are disposable or whatever. Like, they can magically waltz into someone's life, change it, and then walk away. It's basically sharing. It's basically giving the ideal. Once a woman changes your life or whatever, you can just get rid of her. That wouldn't be fair.
Right, of course. And it's like this metaphor for this fleeting femininity, you know, like, oh, she's so beautiful, she waltzes into the ball and then she leaves. And then the man cliche of how the man is supposed to be the protector, you know, like if someone like catcalls her, he's the one that pushes into the car door and is like, if you ever say that to my girl again. Like, it's okay for a man to be sensitive. It's okay for him to not want to fight and to not want to stand up. That's okay. You're allowed to be sensitive. You're allowed to be fragile. You're allowed to have whatever emotions you want to have. And I feel like once you realize that, it's so much easier to cope with what society tells you is wrong. Like, you know that stereotype that guys are not supposed to cry at school, and they cry, it's seen as like weak and like poor sense of judgment or whatever. You're allowed to cry at school. I've cried at school. Hell, I've cried in the middle of class in front of my teacher during an oral exam. Like, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can cry at school. You can cry in the bathroom. You can cry in front of the principal's office. I don't care. Like, you don't have to hold in your emotions because of what books and movies and society and the social media tells you that you have to do. Like, do whatever you want, man. If it's ain't hurting anyone, if it's not hurting you, then do whatever you want.
Exactly. And like we said earlier in a previous season, literature has a very big impact on how society behaves. And if you have literature showing how, oh, men are supposed to be so strong or whatever, and women are supposed to be so emotionally available and stuff, then of course that's going to be reflected in society. And then there's going to be the cycle because literature is based on society. And so this sort of brings me to the stereotypes that women have in society. Beyond the stuff that we talked about before, like women have to be kind and supportive, whatever. So there's this test called like the Bechtel Test. And I think it's basically saying how like women can't go in a conversation without mentioning a man.
I personally hate the fact such a test needs to like exist.
Wait, can you explain the test more? I'm not sure I understand.
So like this test is basically, let's say you're making a film, you need to have proper representation of women in media. You have to pass the Bechtel test, which is kind of like you need to have at least two women who have a conversation about something that is not a man.
So basically, the Bechtel test is inspired by a comic written by Alison Bechtel. And it features two women who are discussing what movies to watch and like the criteria for what movies to watch, right? This comic strip was written in the 80s, so that kind of puts things into perspective.
Wait, why does such a test exist?
So yeah, the criteria are that you have to have two women in a scene where they talk to each other and it's not related to a man. And it's something I think to do with film, like how to create a good film scene. And it's also a test for like social issues too. Like you can perform a test with your friend or something. I guess it kind of reflects how in the past a lot of film has been male-oriented and has been male-centered and not female-centered, just by the nature of the fact that we have a test to show if women can talk about something other than a man, right? Apparently, using this Bechtel test, people like run movies through it, right? So if you have a movie with at least one scene of this thing happening, then you like pass. And a lot of old movies and old books don't pass.
Okay, so like I totally agree with what you just said, Yvette. The fact that the Bechtel test even exists feels kind of terrible. It feels kind of disappointing because our society has evolved in such a way that it has placed women as like supporting characters and objects in movies where there should be equal representation and there should be diversity and stuff like that. Going back to what you said, a lot of old books and old movies don't pass the Bechtel test. That's kind of sad to hear because it's like these old ideals that women somehow aren't respectable enough to have important roles in adventure or like a really good story. It just feels terrible just knowing that such a test has to exist.
Yeah, so the Bechtel test is sort of like a reminder that women have always been erased from history. And along with women, a lot of women's issues, such as like rape and sexual assault, have also been erased or swept under the rug in a sense. But now, like today, we have the Me Too movement. So yeah, what do you guys think about that?
The hashtag Me Too movement is a movement that's basically accepting and believing the victims of rape and or sexual harassment. And a lot of really influential people have come out and basically just been like, yeah, I've been sexually harassed and or raped and or abused. It's a feminist movement, and you can do more research. I implore you to please do your own research on the Me Too movement. A lot of people don't support it. A lot of people feel personally attacked when their like favorite politicians or favorite celebrities are attacked. And they think that the people that are coming out and saying that they were raped are lying. I support the Me Too movement. I believe the victims of rape. I think that everyone is valid. There was a video 3 months ago of Trisha Paytas. And if you don't know who that is, it's a YouTube influencer. She's caused a lot of drama. And Trisha Paytas, 3 months ago, came out with a Meeting My Alters video. And if you don't know what alters are, it is a facet of dissociative identity disorder. Alters are basically your own personalities. I say that in quotation marks because alters are their own people. I don't have DID. I don't do a lot of research on DID. And so 3 months ago, Trisha Paytas came out with a video called Meeting My Alters, where she basically talked about her experience with DID and how, she has DID and she has different alters and whatever, and she talked about her alters and whatever. I watched the video, and I also watched Dissociated's reaction to that video. And I have to say, while I'm not gonna come out here and say that Trisha Paytas is lying, because I cannot say that, I believe her, I believe the victims, and I support the validity of anyone who comes out. She spread a lot of false information about DID, like scientifically very false information. She said she was self-diagnosed. She said a lot of slanderous things about dissociative identity disorder. That's just one example of people spreading false information that could potentially hurt a lot of people and have hurt a lot of people. I don't know what this relates to, but I thought it was just something worth mentioning when talking about the Me Too movement. You can come out here and say that everybody that has come out in the Me Too movement has done it for clout. People have said that. A bunch of people have said that. People that are revealing themselves in the Me Too movement are doing it for clout or attention or whatever, or to get a rise out of someone or whatever. And that may be true. I can't 100% say for certain that everybody that has come out in the Me Too movement is 100% valid. But what I can say is that you shouldn't disregard someone's statement, someone's trauma, someone's life, and disregard it with hateful comments and hateful words.
Yeah, so I didn't know about this, but I agree with what you're saying. Like, I think I would rather have a bunch of people doing it for clout than have a bunch of actual, like, rape or sexual assault abuse survivors be hated on and ignored. But then that begs the question, like, why do we still support very influential people who have done like really bad things? I know there's a lot of politicians, a lot of Instagram, YouTube, TikTok stars that have done like really, really shady things in their past, and yet even though we keep saying we cancel them, like they're still up there, and I don't know why people support them.
Honestly, like a lot of people are saying like, oh, they were falsely accused, or like, oh, I totally don't believe that kind of stuff. It is so fake. Like, there's no way such a good person could do that. But in reality, if you're falsely accused of rape, that's a very, very, very slim chance. In England, you are 230 times more likely to be raped than actually be falsely accused of rape. So many people are saying like, they were probably falsely accused, or so many women decide to falsely accuse people they don't like. That could happen, but it never happens because that's not how it works. And the Me Too movement, it's basically empowering women. It's empowering people who have been hurt and traumatized. It's empowering those people so that they can speak up about it. A lot of people feel like the Me Too movement is like false or somehow not a just cause, but the Me Too movement is exposing a lot of famous people, like what you said, Yvette, politicians, YouTubers, Instagram influencers, TikTok stars. It's exposing all of those people for the bad people that they truly are. For a lot of people not to believe that, for a lot of people to still support such bad people and saying like, oh, they were probably falsely accused, or, well, they make good content, so I should probably still support them. That argument is completely invalid. For such people, such influencers and famous people, to believe that their life is somehow more important than these tens of thousands of lives who have faced such trauma and hurt and like assault, that feels very wrong to me.
It's just because they're famous, and that gives them more power than like tens of thousands of people. Society kind of is really messed up. So I think our final topic for this episode, we're just going to talk about sort of the different sectors of feminism. And one that's popped up very recently because of famous Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling is this TERF movement. So TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. And basically what they're saying is that they don't support transgender people. So they are, as the name suggests, they exclude trans people from like the LGBT plus community, according to them. And so basically a month ago she tweeted out a very, very transphobic set of tweets about how like transgender invalidates sex or whatever, and like how transgender people are doing it to escape the stigma of being a woman or the stigma of being a man or whatever. It was so weird. But she put it on her manifesto on jkrowling.com. And I read through it and it was just so weird, really. Like, I think it goes beyond like being misinformed about trans people. It goes to like being actively transphobic. And there's a lot of really good YouTube videos, Instagram posts, news articles talking about what she did wrong. So the TERF movement is arguing that trans people, especially like trans women, like men transitioning to women, they're saying that, oh, we don't support that because what if men are using it to get at women, you know? What if men are becoming women, as in, you know, being trans women in order to sort of invalidate women and bring the focus from women's troubles to trans people's troubles? And more like, oh, what if men transitioning to women now have freedom to enter like women's bathrooms and women's changing rooms and, you know, molest or sexually assault them? And I don't know, I think it's a load of BS. What do you guys think?
What sickens me about this whole J.K. Rowling situation, I've read a couple articles. I read the one that you wrote. Go to the latepost.net, everybody, self-promo. What sickens me about the situation is that imagine growing up trans, as a trans woman, right? Like being told your whole life that you're in this man's body and that you have to uphold to these like societal like men's values, and you coming to terms with the fact you're a woman, like you've always been a woman, right? J.K. Rowling's series influenced so many people in so many different ways. And one of those ways was helping people to accept who they are for what they are. That certainly helped the LGBTQ plus community. That helped the feminist movement, you know, with like Hermione, you know, being her own like standalone feminine figure. And what sickens me is that this book influenced so many people's lives. And then J.K. Rowling wants to put out a statement saying that she doesn't support what her book series was trying to do. Like, that makes me feel a different brand of angry. You know, like, that makes me feel just past the state of angry. Like, I walked across the finish line of angry, and I just kept going, man. She inspired, she helped develop, you know, people's creative imaginations. And then she wants to turn around and say that trans people aren't valid. That makes me sick, you know, that just makes me sick. And I think it's utter BS. Like, the TERF movement is basically supporting every other facet of the LGBTQ plus community, except for the trans community. That's BS.
Trans women are still women. I don't care what J.K. Rowling has to say. I don't care that she's some world-famous, award-winning author, because her opinion is so invalid. Why is she hating against a group of people because they're different from her? How is she even a feminist? How is she considered a feminist if she decides a certain type of woman is not to be respected and it invalidates her rights as like a cis white woman? Are you kidding me? How does that even work? Why have you decided that you can be discriminatory against trans women, against trans men, against the trans community in general. Like, what has happened in your life for you to become such a hateful person who has decided that you are just going to disrespect a group of people for absolutely no reason?
Right. So I have pulled up her little manifesto, essay, whatever, and I'm just going to go through it and give you some arguments. And answering Megan's question about what J.K. Rowling has gone through, actually, one of the reasons why she justifies being a TERF is that she has gone through domestic abuse before, and she has a survival of sexual assault. And while those are very, very big, very important issues, she's using them as a way to justify being anti-trans. And I think that's just awful. So one of her big arguments for anti-trans, the fact that women must not only be trans allies, but women must accept and admit that there is no material difference between trans women and themselves. So she's arguing that, like, oh, now men, the patriarchy has created an entire new way for women to invalidate their identity again. So, like, as she writes, but as many women have said before me, woman is not a costume, woman is not an idea in a man's head. So what she's saying is that trans women are now chipping away at the identity of being a woman.
I think that's wrong for a variety of reasons. I mean, she's saying that being trans, especially being a trans woman, is like putting on a costume, pretending to be something you're not. I can't speak from personal experience, right? But as someone who will strongly defend the LGBTQ+, will strongly defend that movement. Okay, imagine growing up and not feeling right in your body. J.K. Rowling has never gone through that. She will never go through that. She does not know how it feels to wake up every day and want to be in a different body than the one you were born in. She has no idea what that's like. And she's going to justify not supporting trans people by saying it's a costume, that people are pretending to be something they're not. This reminds me of the abortion laws. I get enraged every time I think about the abortion laws being passed. The amount of times a man has stood in front of a court and argued about what he thinks should go on in a woman's body is astronomical. I cannot count on my fingers the amount of times a man has stood in front of educated people and has spread these misinformed, bigoted views on the effects on women's bodies. And this reminds me of that, you know? She will never know what it is like to be a trans woman. She will never know. And yet she is justifying it based on an experience that she's had. She's justifying the future that she thinks other people should have just because of something that she's gone through.
You are allowed to cope and express your trauma and your experiences with domestic abuse, assault, stuff like that. You are allowed to express it however you'd like, but it does not excuse being discriminatory against a group of people whose gender identity doesn't fit with the body that they were born with. You don't get to be racist or bigoted or discriminatory just because you went through a traumatic experience. And while going through a traumatic experience is valid and it's okay to express your pain for that, I just hate the fact that J.K. Rowling uses that as an excuse to be rude, to say that trans women aren't actually women, to say that the trans community is invalid. Going back to what you said, Voica, how an educated man has stood in front of educated people and argued that abortion is bad for women's bodies, it makes me feel terrible. Because if that person doesn't understand women are allowed to do what they want with their bodies, anyone is allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies, whether it be a man whose gender identity is a woman and decides, I want to have a sex change. Like, you're allowed to do that. If someone doesn't understand that, then are they truly educated? Do they truly realize what it is like to feel like that? Because I can guarantee that all of the people who have argued, like, oh, abortion shouldn't take place, you should ban it, I guarantee that all of those people who have argued that are uneducated and that they don't realize what it's like to disagree with your body, to disagree with who you are and your identity as a person.
I'm sure that J.K. Rowling went through a lot in sharing what she went through. And like I said before, I respect everyone's ability to express what happened to them and what they went through. And I validate anybody who has the courage to come out and openly say what they went through. I'm sure she went through a lot in sharing what she did, and I'm sure it took a lot. At the same time, using that trauma and using that as a way to negate other people's validity, it's wrong. And like I said, it does remind me of the abortion laws that people are passing in a bunch of states, and that is going on, that has been going on. And that's a good segue to wrap up this episode, because we are going to be talking about abortion laws in the next episode. We're going to get more into detail. We're going to be just discussing the whole shebang. But thank you for coming to this episode, you guys. You have no idea how much this meant to all three of us to get to express our feminist views. Yay. Please be sure to follow us on our Instagram at _PB podcast. And we're on YouTube now too. And thank you for coming. That's the tea.